conversations. Let's have real conversations.
Get ready to stir it up.
Life events and everything in between. Let's go.
Get ready to stir it up.
No capping. If guests got you covered right up.
Get ready to stir it up. Stir it up.
Come on.
Get ready to stir it up.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Stir It Up. Today I have Wachua Glover with us. It's great to have you here. Wachua is an author and an organizational psychologist. Today we're going to be talking about the journey to getting legal rights to a child. And it's quite a journey, right? Given our country and how things work. And so it's really great to have you.
It's good to be here. I'm excited. Looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. This is a rather sensitive conversation, and I know that it's something a lot of people have to deal with within our system. Now, the first thing I think about is there's so many people who are trying to start a family sometimes, couples and individuals, and sometimes it's also people trying to expand their family, or people who are trying to, support someone who is in need. So that's one side of the, divide. And then there are thousands, of children who do not have a primary caregiver or, don't have the support that they need for their basic livelihood, be it, education, sustenance, or, and so you would think that, and without sounding crude, you think basic law of demand and supply, these two things could, come together quite seamlessly. But I hear many, many horror stories about how it's almost impossible sometimes to get legal rights to support a child, right? So it would be good to kind of start the conversation about you telling me about, telling us about what it does mean to get legal rights, to a child. Within our context. Yes. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yes. So, and thank you. Like you said, it is a bit of a sensitive topic because it's my lived experience, and I've been in the process for 5 years, since 2018, with no end in sight, it seems. So maybe let me just describe the process. I mean, obviously, to get a child, you have biology, or different methods like surrogacy, but there's also the means of legal rights. You're actually being given a child and you're given legal rights. The rights that you can give to someone for a child are twofold. Either it is custody or it is adoption when we talk about legal rights. Adoption is full parental rights. That child is yours. No one can come later to claim that child. That child is yours just as if you gave birth to that child. Got it. So no one can walk into your home in a way, well, not say no one can claim. I mean, you can have a relative say, I can do better than Akua. Akua also taking care of her kids, so I'm going to file for custody. But you have parental rights. Custody is almost like temporary. It's guardianship. You are, for that moment, caring for the child, so you need some legal rights to make some decisions, but the child is not yours. You're not regarded as the parent. So you see that even with forms, you can either choose guardian or parent. And it's a reminder that if it's guardianship or custody, you're not the parent. At any point, someone else, be it the biological parents, can come and regain custody to that child.
Regardless of their circumstances?
So that is where we go left, in my opinion, when it comes to legal rights to a child, to be quite honest. The Children's Act states that preference is for children to be with their biological parents, unless, but most of the time we forget that unless and take that first line to say preference is for a child to be with their biological parent and forget the unless. And the unless is quite numerous. Unless that parent is not good for the well-being of the child. Either they cannot cover the necessaries for the child, health, education, mental well-being, a place to live, sleep. But unfortunately, and I've experienced it, in our culture, society, and legal system, that's the unfortunate part, we almost give total sort of like access to a parent once they are biological. And we don't place as much onus on can they. As long as a biological parent shows up and you are just temporarily looking after the child, or you just have custody, your stance against that parent is diminished
Significantly.
significantly. If you ask a lot of different lawyers, it's almost like it's a given, and it shouldn't be a given, because even the law doesn't make it a given. But in practice, so there's law and then there's practice. The act is there, but in practice, we make it almost like, well, the mother has come, it doesn't matter what the mother's circumstances, the child should be with their mother. Every child should be with their mother. So it makes you must fight.
But that's not the case in developed countries,
It's
right?
not.
Because I've seen my mom provides a lot of support to kids because she's done quite a bit of social work and fostering and so on. And I mean, I see the amount of work she does to support young children, right? I don't know the details of the work, of the circumstances of the kids, right? But you can tell that it's children being taken out of difficult situations and being placed into care, right? And you also read about kids being taken away from biological parents who might be working but might have a drug issue or might have a, so clearly the state will take kids away from from parents if the parents pose a danger of any sort to the kids and place them with someone else.
Yes, but you see, what you've described requires work.
Right.
And two things are happening in our society. Number one, in a way, we're trying to prevent anyone from disadvantaging, let's say, a vulnerable biological mother. We're trying to make sure that someone with money, prestige, can't just walk in, take your child, and you have no recourse. Which is fair. But we must handle it on a case-by-case basis, and that is where our system is failing. Because you must assess each situation as it is and make a determination. That takes work, that takes resources.
And is it because we don't have the resources, so we're kind of taking the easy way out? Or it's just we are not equipped?
It's both.
It's both.
It's both. And also we're not equipped, we don't have the resources, but also we're not really working with the law. They could look at this on a case-by-case basis, but somehow, the thing where, sometimes we say something's from the Bible, but it's not. But it's been said so many times, and someone thinks
one good turn deserves another.
It's not from the Bible. So our entire legal system has somehow been conditioned, and I'll use the word conditioned, to state or to work or operate as if once it's biological, it's a given. Yeah. But it's not the law. The law says preference, but if that biological parent cannot, then someone else must. Yeah. But we stop at that preference and forget the but, because it becomes practice. So it's a matter of resources, a matter of know-how, but it's also a matter of just practice. So we're not going further. They're lawyers with experience that you talk to them. I've spoken to like 15 lawyers on the subject. It's like, oh, the biological mother has come into the picture, then I don't know what to tell you, but no. It's unfortunate,
So we've talked a bit about the legal bit, right? But we also operate within a social and cultural construct, right? What are some of the social elements and cultural elements that make adoption difficult?
The social and cultural elements that make adoption difficult is they feel like adoption is a foreign construct. They feel like adoption is a legal construct. Why do you need to adopt? My father gave me to this person. My mother gave me to this person. I grew up with an aunt. I grew up with an uncle. Why do you need to go the legal route? And the experience I'm going through is almost like the definition of that social and cultural issue. Because with my boy that I'm trying to get custody of was living with previous relatives for about 4.5 years and then never went the legal route. They simply took the child from his biological mother because they felt the biological mother was not capable, but they did not take it through the legal social welfare route to say, this person can't, I can. They simply took the child. Then they created fraudulent birth certificates. And people do that. And simply
You can literally
proceeded.
walk into the birth
People
and
do
death
that,
and create
yes.
a birth certificate.
And they were simply operating under that until the caregiver passed. And then the child, through certain circumstances, came to me. Me being me, with school and exposure, book long, that's what they say. It's like, you just use the term that's my accusation. Everyone says I'm book long. I mean, this kid was with this family for how long? There was no book long, paper legal. But the minute he came into my care, I get a lawyer. I take him to Kolubu for assessment. I go to social welfare. And then the entire family is riled up to say, why?
Why?
You don't need to. And I have one of my cousins saying that, I didn't know my dad until whenever, because my dad gave me to this person and that person. I'm also caring for my housekeeper's 2 children for the last 10 years. I have no intention to adopt. That's the societal and cultural issue. We do not adopt. We take, we care of, or we care for, or we give away. But to actually seek that legal right, they feel like it's a foreign concept, and people don't understand why you need to do that.
Tell me why you want to have that legal right.
Yes. For the stability of the child. And it hurts me to my core. Like, I've been caring for him for 5 years. I don't have any legal paperwork. I have nothing. No birth certificate. I'm not going to go and create a fraudulent one, which means there's a risk for the child. There's a risk of separation. There's a risk of trauma to the child. In addition, besides stability, you really can't take certain decisions for the child if you're not the legal guardian or caregiver or parent. You also cannot travel with the child. If you take a child to any school, they ask you for his birth documents, your documents, and if you're traveling, you need travel documents, passport. You can't get a passport for the child. So there's so many limitations.
Without it being done fraudulently.
Without it being done fraudulently. Yeah. There's so many limitations. There's a story a lawyer told me of a woman who got a child through, exchange of funds. And got a birth certificate and everything. And then she was traveling to the US, relocated with the family. I don't know how or why. She forgot for a minute, this is not my biological child, and submitted the child through DNA. And it comes out, well, it's not yours. She was like, yes. She was like, okay, show us your adoption. It's either you gave birth to the child or you're adopted. Or it's not, And she couldn't show birth, which is through DNA, or adoption paper because she didn't adopt. So then it creates an issue. Those are some of the limitations, really.
So what you say that really struck a nerve is the stability of the child.
Yes.
Because what I hear you say is, if a mother has, significantly more rights to the child than you do, then a mother can rock up next Wednesday and say, oh, I want my child back.
Yes.
And might not have the means to continue the child's education.
Yes.
Might not actually even care about the child. But depending on the mother's stability or intentions, and we know that human beings are human beings, and might not always have the best of intentions, or might be a bit self-serving, right? Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, could destabilize the child.
Yes.
Meanwhile, this child would have bonded with you, would see you as their mother to a very large extent, mm-hmm. and that child's life would be completely thrown in disarray.
Completely.
And would not be able to even offer the child the same quality of life that you've offered them, right? And it's not about just the money, it's about the bonding, it's about consistency, continuity, and all of those things. And that living in that constant fear can be a little bit unsettling. And I kind of choose my words carefully. I can see that,
My heart skipped a beat for a moment when you were narrating that, because that is truly my life. And it's one of the reasons why I'm actually going through therapy, because I am also in constant fear. You wake up in the morning, you've bonded with this child, the child calls you mommy, you have a relationship with the child, and there's a risk factor sitting somewhere, and you know that risk factor is not good for the child. You know that that person, in my instance, doesn't have a job, lives on the goodwill of other people, and you're not trying to denigrate anyone, but they can't support and care for the child, and where they live and their circumstances is completely opposite, and they haven't seen this child in 10 years. They have no relationship with the child, and you would hope our system would look at those things and think, our system says welfare principle, best interest of the child. Yeah. But our system is not enforcing that. The law says best interest of the child, welfare principle. But the system does not enforce that welfare principle. And this child who's supposed to have a voice, you say, well, it doesn't matter what the child wants. If not, the child will say, we'll choose a rich uncle over their mother. So, hey, it's just quite unfortunate.
So, tell me a bit about the process, because I ask, tell us a bit about the process, because I remember years ago, I went to 30 Police Hospital and I met a guy from social welfare, and this is when I had dreams of adopting a child, because I had 2 daughters, and I've always wanted to have more kids. And I was just thinking, I really wanted to have another child, but I also thought, you know what, do I really want to have one of my own, or do I want to help someone else, right? And so I got into this conversation, but the process seemed so complicated. Yeah. And this guy ended up a conversation and said, oh, you know what, I can just help you get one. Mm-hmm. And it was as simple as that. And it just sounded like, oh, you can help me get one, how, mm-hmm. right? And then he said, oh, I can give you a newborn baby, mm-hmm. And I'm like, mm-hmm. And I said, and what? He says, oh, you don't have to pay me for it. There's so many of them. Yeah. We can arrange and you can have one and mm-hmm. care for it, and that's all. And that's it.
And he'll give you the birth certificate.
And yes, he says he could give me everything. And I said, and am I paying for this? What is it? He says, no, you don't have to pay for me. Auntie, there are so many of the babies. We can give you a baby, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think what was comforting for me was he wasn't trying to sell me a baby, so that felt good. But at the same time, the fact that there was no actual system accounting for
the babies. They can sell them, they can give them away, and there's no system saying that 20 babies were born at this hospital, where did they go? No. And that's because social welfare can walk in and take the babies and take them under their control without sometimes going through the right paperwork. And the hospitals also don't want the babies to be there, because sometimes the mothers abandon the babies in the hospital. So there's so many reasons why there isn't proper accounting. But to talk about the process, so I'll talk about the adoption process first. So the adoption process is, if you're interested, the way to go is you must register. So they have a book or so, or something that you go to social welfare and you write in it. And you put your name down. If you're before 55 years of age, if you're past 55, you cannot adopt, unless you're adopting a family member. And with that, the limit is 65. So if you're adopting a non-family member, it's 55. So you sign, you put your details. You can be on that list for over 10 years. I know someone who's been on it for like almost getting close to 55 now, and she's been on it for a very long time.
And there are kids out there on the street.
Yes. The unfortunate thing is that list sometimes works, it doesn't work. When you met that person, he could have jumped you, if you know what I mean. But the normal people who don't know people would go in and write their name. So let's say you go through the normal process of you write your name. When a baby is found, you start with fostering. So if there's a newborn baby, they give you the baby to foster. Every biological parent, even if they verbally tell social welfare or they write that I give up my rights, has 1 year for that to truly be confirmed. Which means,
because they can change their mind.
Yes, and the law allows that, because in that moment that you gave up your rights, which is soon after birth, maybe you were upset. You didn't have family support.
Or your personal circumstances.
Yes, and maybe in 6 months, the man who abandoned you comes and says, let's do this. Or your mother who wasn't keen on you getting pregnant says, you know what, that's my grandchild. So you were given up to a year. That's the biological parent. So You are fostering. You that you have the baby, you are fostering. You were supposed to be trained on how to foster, but you have this newborn baby that you care for with diapers and milk and cradling and comforting for only a year that you are anticipating, will they or will they not? And then at the end of the year, sometimes they can extend it just to make sure. And social welfare is supposed to find the birth mother and demonstrate they've done everything they can to find the birth mother. So whether it is announcements, radio, TV, they must make an effort to find the birth mother. And then after a year, if the birth mother has not shown up, you can then begin the process. So they do home study. Home study means they come to your home and check your circumstances, your job, your finances. They do a background check, police report, medicals, all of that is done. When you pass your home study,
who pays for the home study?
You, the individual who wants to adopt. Once the home study is done, the report is then submitted to the adoption council. They have reports a mile long. The adoption council then has to review your application. If they have further questions, they will have to ask. If the adoption council passes you, then it goes to court. Only a judge in Ghana can grant anybody parental or custodial rights. Nobody else can. So if you go to social welfare, which is what they did to me, and I wasn't educated then, they made it seem like, oh, we're not going to let you do adoption or guardianship. You're just going to, let the child be with you and let's wait and see. No. Social welfare hasn't got the right to determine whether or not you can have a child. All they can do is take your application, do home study, and refer you. So it's the number one issue that we have, and I want to stress it because it happened to me, where social welfare assumed certain rights they didn't have
authority to.
Only a judge makes that decision on whether or not you can have a child. So when the adoption committee passes you, so remember, you foster, home study, adoption committee, then you can go and submit to a judge. Obviously, our legal system is like inundated. So at a point, the judge would then cross all T's to make sure the home study was done properly, to make sure effort was made to find the mother. If the judge looks at everything and says, you guys didn't make an effort to find the mother, it doesn't matter if it's been 4 years in the system. He can instruct social welfare to go and try
go back. Yeah.
Because maybe there's something about the adoptive parents that they don't quite,
it's not clear.
It's not clear.
Plus, remember, the mother has first,
yes,
to put it bluntly, first right of refusal, isn't it?
Yes. So the judge can restart the whole process if they want to. And as this is ongoing, then when everything is done, you testify, you talk about yourself, the judge may ask questions, whatever it may be. If anybody opposes, it all happens in the legal system. Now here's the catch about adoption. You need either the biological mother's consent or the family's consent. Without that, it's very difficult for the judge to waive it off.
But what if you can't find...
Exactly.
Because which might be the case
they
very
must
often.
show that they've made an effort. And if you can find, and they are refusing. So in my case, I wanted to go the adoption route, but the relatives were creating a bit of an issue. So then we decided, which would bring me to the second step, custody. So the adoption, and by the way, during this whole time that you've gone through fostering, home study, adoption committee to the judge, you have no rights on the child. At any point, social welfare themselves
can come back and yank the child away
can
from
go
you.
get a care order or go do something and say, we've changed our minds about this person's suitability, and take the child from you. So that brings people to the second thing, which is custody. So a lot of applicants are seeking custody as they're going through the process. One lawyer mentioned some clients who'd been waiting for 5 years. The kid is like getting on 6. So they went and filed for custody. Custody is temporary. The custody process is shorter in the sense that if you want custody today, like if your housekeeper has a child and you're like, I want to take care of this child, you can go and apply today. You can go and apply for custody today. You don't have to go through fostering and all those things, adoption committee. You file, the judge looks at your documents. You also don't need the family's consent to get custody. If the family later wants to regain custody, they must also apply. So that's why some people choose custody, because it's less of a long, drawn-out process, and it's meant to be a bit quicker. So even churches, and my church, when I was going through this process, mentioned that, yes, for us, we sometimes also apply for custody of some of the orphans in our care. So that is custody. It's temporary, it's straight to a judge. And adoption is permanent, which means it's longer, and it also goes to a judge.
Wow.
Yes.
You know, I think we are being overrun in this country by the number of children on the street.
Yes.
When you get to a traffic light, yes, some of them are coming from homes, but a whole lot of them are still sleeping on the streets.
Yeah.
Right? And some of them are born, in hospitals and left. And this weekend, a very close family friend of mine turned 60. So we went to a home in Dakuman, a whole bunch of kids. And it was just amazing to watch. Really bright kids, very eloquent, beautiful babies, right? Living in
Squalor.
yeah, right? And various families bringing them food, and but it's food. It's not enough to actually take care of them. And the guy kept on saying, that what he needs is money and infrastructure to take care of them, right? And so my family friend and I were saying we now understand why he was asking that he needs money and infrastructure and not food. Because in the 2 hours we were there, we had different people who had come and just brought them food, which is all well and good, right? But I think it will be an amazing thing if we put in the right resources and infrastructure to just make this function seamlessly. So even if it was just having a few judges who are responsible for that, and even that alone, I don't know if that's what the case is, right? Or just even investing a bit into social welfare, just to provide them with the technology and the infrastructure to make this a very seamless process with the hospitals and so on and so forth. Because I see that it's a huge missed opportunity, because you'll be a great mom, or you are a great mom.
I am a great mom.
You know what I mean? And you want to do this.
Yes.
So why should the system, inefficiencies in the system,
Yes.
stop you from doing that?
Yes. And the most interesting thing, if I might tackle something at the end and then I'll go to the top, is you want to do this. And I've had relatives and non-relatives and even legal people say, just give the child back. Almost, and I keep saying, as if it's a suitcase.
It's not a thing.
As if it's a property in my home that you say, but why are you going through all of this? Just give the child back to them. Just give the child back to them. As if it's not a human being that I've cradled and cared for and taken him to soccer and football and all of these things. And we watch movies together. And as if it's not a human being. That is the number one challenge with our social care orphanages system. As if it's not a human being.
I'll ask you something. So back to the question on what are the things that hold back socially. So one of the things that I was afraid of when I began to think about adopting was, and I'll tell you how I dealt with it, and then maybe you can tell me if it's a genuine fear or if it's not, right? So I've experienced quite a few people who've adopted kids, both legally and in our traditional and informal adoption, right? Yeah. And one of the things that I found consistently was when kids who'd been supported really, or who'd been part of a home, would invariably, at the end of the day, seek after their biological families. It was a no-brainer at the end of the day. And so I began to kind of ask a lot of questions around the fact that what was driving that. And the questions would get answered by, it's a deep-seated longing, wanting to know, where did I come from? What's my history? Why? Okay. And which is understandable, because as humans, I think we have that unending quest to understand the why behind the why behind the why. And there were occasions where some of these kids were actually even closer to their adoptive parents than they would ever be to even their own biological parents. And there were instances where the relationship didn't always end really well because, you know, sometimes it kind of went in a direction that was not always, you know, the best. And the thing I told myself was, I'm choosing to love and I'm choosing to invest, and that's a personal choice I make. And love will always be a risk, and so we love without fear. And my interpretation of loving without fear is, I do not love because I expect to be loved back.
Exactly.
I love because it makes me whole.
Exactly.
And because love is something that you always stand the risk of getting hurt. Exactly that, right? And so that's how I navigated that, right? But I think for a lot of people out there, it's a palpable fear of adoption, right? Where they feel like, if I'm going to go down that line, you know. So what do you say to a couple or a young woman or a young man who wants to support another child? Beyond what I've shared, what do you say to them about adoption? How do you encourage them? What are your thoughts from a social or cultural perspective?
Yeah, I think my thoughts are just to see how my son is doing. I wouldn't sort of change that for the world. You are going to impact life. You're going to impact a life that if you didn't take that decision, that life might end up in some other circumstance. So to focus on, you're going to impact a life. And you've also answered it by saying it doesn't necessarily have to be reciprocal. It doesn't have to be, and with our own biological kids, who says they don't grow up and sometimes abandon you, or not talk to you, or just completely write you off, or disown you? It can happen. A child is a child, and when they grow up to become adults, it can happen. So sometimes when they're seeking a biological relative, you don't need to fight it or think it means it's an indictment on you. It's not an indictment on you. As long as you know you've done your best, and that goes for all parents, right? As long as you know you've done your best, you've loved them unconditionally and done your best, whatever they do later, you support it as best as you can, and you sort of live with it. We shouldn't fear that a child might no longer want to be with you or love you or see you as you were temporary. But so what if you were temporary? You've still helped a soul. So what if you just took care of a child for 18 years or 20 years and they moved on? They won't forget you though.
No,
they won't. You've still helped a soul. Because I had the same reaction, not me personally, but people were telling me that, do you know that when he's older, all this fight, you are fighting with the other party, they'll just go to the other party. I'm like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine, they will know. They will know though that you actually did good by them. So I don't fear that. And I think most people, it's a natural fear, but hopefully they can learn and work to overcome it. But the other thing, which is a little bit of the ugly side, is with that fear, people then treat adoptive kids different. Because you're almost like you're on edge. You don't want to give them too much. So even when it comes to things like property or love, you're holding back. And kids can sense if you're holding back.
Absolutely. We can all sense when someone holds back.
So you must act like that is 100% your child. Just do it. Go full steam. Whatever happens, happens. But it's a real fear, yes.
So I love the fact that you say that you can't hold back. And it's that 110% mentality, isn't it? And I absolutely love when you talk about that everything is a risk, even with our children. Like my little babies here. Hey, those girls, they give me a run for my money. You know, there are times when I do something and then my older daughter says to me, you follow that child of yours. She's putting you in an old people's home. I'm the one who's going to take care of you. Right? You know, so, and we say it as a joke, right? But the reality is that you don't know what you don't know. And So you can only give your very best.
That's it.
You can only give your very best.
It's the same for marriage, isn't it? In 20 years, the person might just go get a younger model. Life is a risk. It's the same thing, whether it's a job or spouse or child. You do your best. That's all anybody can ask you to do. Just do your best. The rest is on them. That's it.
Yeah. So when you think about our system, if there are two little things we can do, because I'm sorry that I don't sound very hopeful. There are days when I have hope. Like there are days when I wake up and I feel like a luta continua, Victoria Excelsa, is that how it's said, right? Like this is gonna work, right?
Let's do this.
Let's do this, right? And there are days when I feel like, this is not the day. Let me just read a book and lie in my bed, right? And let me just shine bright in my own corner. If there are two little things we can do to begin to make this a better experience, either from a system perspective or a social perspective, what would they be?
That's a very good question. I mean, I start from a legal perspective, but the social one is bigger. But I start from a legal perspective where I feel like there has to be more. So adoption is done at the high court, not at the lower level court. So adoption has been raised up such that you don't have lower level courts making those decisions because it's about a child.
Understood.
But the higher level courts do need some continuous education. I don't know how it really is. I don't want to speak out of turn, but once you become, whether it's a high court judge, whatever it is, I don't know how much continuous refreshment, or if you mentioned maybe some judges alone should deal with custody. That's very, very difficult, or adoption. But they do need to remind themselves of the law. And the Canadian Supreme Court did just that. They recognized that there was a default to biology, and they issued, whether it's called a writ or whatever it is, that the term biological mother has been used wrongly. Right. And they tied it to any emotional connection to a child and said no court should default to biological parents. That's the Canadian Supreme Court. I feel like the high ends of our justice system, whether it's our Supreme Court, our Chief Justice, needs to remind our justices and our judges and magistrates who are making decisions on children that the welfare principle is paramount. We're missing that. And there has to be some refresher, some reinforcement, some push to remember the child is central. And it's not about the rich person, the poor person, this person, that person, it's the child. And to assess all factors affecting the child critically and not to make hasty decisions. That reinforcement needs to come from the top because kids are getting impacted. Yeah. And then from a societal perspective, families need to sort of work together, come together to protect children. The reason why there's so many kids out there without support on the streets, to me, that's just my opinion, some family dynamics have broken down beyond repair such that we're not stepping up as we used to do. In the past, a child would not go uncared for or untended to.
Yes.
Even if you're broke, you would rally as a community, as a society, and take care of your own. You would rally as a family and take care of your own. We're not doing that anymore. Even in our, let's call it modern generation, how many of us are taking on cousins' kids to help them, whether it's help with education, come spend a week, come spend the summer? We've become very nuclear. Which is
or
a Western,
individualistic.
Yeah. And in other Asian communities or even African communities, we used to be very communal. It was not about I, but we've become individualistic, which is leading to this breakdown. You might
why have we become individualistic?
I think maybe it's a stretch of resources. We now want more for ourselves and our biological kids. You don't want to impact your biological kids' opportunities by taking on other relatives' kids, and then it affects them. And it's something that, for me, because of my dad's situation and other situations, we grew up with our grandparents, and there were other kids in the house and things like that, right? Like you rally. And my granddad was taking care of other people as well. Yeah. But you don't see that so much anymore. When I had a housekeeper who had an issue, you know. And the housekeeper, people were saying, why are you still caring for the housekeeper? And when I referenced my dad's situation, my dad had schizophrenia. But the family rallied. You know, my mom was not left as an island taking care of 3 kids. The family rallied. Her cousins, her parents. You don't see that type of rallying in our society anymore. Those kids out there, they have families, they have relatives, but they're trying to make their own ends meet that I can't do this. And I think those two, if we could strengthen our legal system, if we could strengthen the societal family, you know, even family heads had such influence in the past, where they'll tell you, no, I'm instructing you to take care of Akosia's child.
Yeah.
So Akosia, you know, Akosia's child is coming to you.
Yeah.
You know, family heads were almost acting like social welfare to make sure that the kids in the families were taken care of and not letting them be
run amok.
Yes. Yeah. So we've lost a bit of that, and we need to find a way to get back to that. I do know it's not easy because of economics, but and the funny thing is we're such a religious society, isn't it? We're very...
But our religion, you know, our religion is superficial.
It is, though, and that's the unfortunate thing, because the Bible does say you care for the fatherless, you care for the widows, you care for people. And if we were to really align to the principles of Christianity, we wouldn't have some of these situations happen.
Our religion is, you know, I was having a long conversation with a couple of my kinky buddies yesterday, and this is all I do.
I like the kinky buddies.
In my free time, it's deep conversations for me. And we were talking about religion and how it's deep in the fabric of our society. And it was boiling down to the fact that in South African cultures, yes, they're Christian, but they will openly go to a Sangoma and talk to Mother Earth and to say XYZ has offended me. And so I want to know, right? And it's not young people go to a witch doctor and there's nothing, you know, it's not hidden, right? They believe in it. Here, we go to church, we raise our hands up, and we are religious. We believe in Jesus Christ, the Savior. And then in the dark, we will go to Malam.
Yes.
And we will hide it.
Yes.
Right? And that duplicity, it transcends a lot of different parts of us, right? And unfortunately, it's also transcending the way we even care for each other, right? So we are religious in raising our hands and worshiping and being overt in how we serve God, but in the way we treat our neighbor.
But God has become almost like an ATM, to be quite honest. We've
lost
lost the core principles.
When we need
we're being religious because we need something from God. Not because we want to do something for God. If we had more of the mentality,
to serve Him, or we want to be true to the goodness that comes out.
We want to almost
cash out.
But we're not really hinging things on the principles of Christianity. Because what did God say in terms of, you know, you love one another? He didn't say just love me and be done with it. So you have to love that child that is out there in your family that is not being cared for. But we don't. We're missing so many things when it comes to custody, adoption, and children. The legal system, the societal system, the religious system. Look at all these mega churches in Ghana. What are they doing for the children out there? They'll say they're doing their best.
They feed them once a year at Easter.
They will do some outreach every now and then. But they need to go back to educating their church members. But because they don't want their church members' funds to be diverted, they're not going to reinforce to you that care for those who are uncared for in your families. That means you're encouraging them to divert their funds. So say, bring your funds to me, I will help the children out there. But you also need to encourage your church members to take care of their societies. Their communities, their families. Be more community driven. Not just through church, but on your own, be more community driven. But we have delegated to church We've even delegated prayer to church. Everything is the pastor. You can't pray to God unless the pastor prays to God for you. We need to stop delegating and take responsibility as citizens of the society, of our communities, and of our families. We owe it to each other.
Thank you. I think that this conversation could go on and on and on.
Absolutely.
And it's rich. It's full of emotion, but it's also full of what the fabric of our society is made up of, in the sense that there's so much opportunity to bring two really big needs in terms of how do we enrich the lives of many young children who need care and support, and how do we provide an opportunity for people who are yearning to provide support for young children.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bachwa.
Thank you, Ikea.
So,
Wow.
as per usual, to the fun part of all of this, cocktails.
Wow. I didn't expect that. What do you want me to do?
Stir it up.
Okay.
Cheers. Do you want to do
Yeah,
clink
let's do-
glasses?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. And then you can taste it and tell me what flavors you taste.
Oh my gosh. Let me look at the color first in case it helps.
It won't help. Seeing as it's not alcoholic, you struggle.
I know it, but I know it. It's like I know this. I know this.
You do know this.
I do know this.
You know you do.
I do. It's not a common fruit.
Try.
Is it kiwi?
No, there's no kiwi.
I know this fruit, man. It's not cranberry, is it?
No, there's no cranberry. On that note, Bachwa, it was amazing having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to wear my boo-boo
What is it?
and look like
What is
it's
it?
out.